Hello there, and welcome to another great video game ideas not used video, GBGINU for short. As always, I'm Andre, and it is a pleasure to share my thoughts with you today. Um, yeah, the subject matter of this video was the Sega Dreamcast. Quite obviously, you read the title, you know it was about the Dreamcast. Um, I can't really say that the console itself ever really died. Yes, from a retail standpoint, from a sales standpoint, it was a very unsuccessful console. But to that same token, the game console was originally released in 1998. In North America, it was 99.99. But it's actually still doing pretty well as a console, even though people will say the Dreamcast sucks and all that. But like, the console itself really didn't have any problems. It was just that it didn't really have a whole lot of third party support, and Sega had a bad habit of not really, pushing their consoles to the fullest extent that they could. They would always like throw something else together with it, which was fine. I mean, but they never really, you know, went and like fought for all that additional stuff that they needed. If they didn't have it, they always felt, well, fuck it, we'll just make it ourselves or make something similar. But yeah, I'm just sitting around. Well, I was just sitting around just because I was bored and I wanted to find out about some games and things. And like, and I have a Dreamcast, so I'm looking up some stuff I can get for it. And I come to find out that in Japan, like really, the Dreamcast lasted until just 2007. That's only 5 years ago. Like in the U.S., yeah, it died in it completely died in 2002. The last game for Dreamcast outside of Japan, at least as far as what I've seen, was NHL 2K, and that was the in the United States, like I said. But the last official Dreamcast game that was made is a game called. I'm trying to make sure I say this correctly because I don't know if I am. But it's Karus or Karaus or something like that, which came out in 2007, which was an over-the-top overhead shooter, space shooter. It actually looks really interesting. I'm thinking about going ahead and importing it and getting my hands on it to play it. But it was really like Dreamcast actually did rather well as opposed to what people believe. If you go ahead and look back and you think about from the timeline it started, because it was a sixth generation console. You go from back then, let's say, gosh, my mind, from 1998 all the way to 2007, running. Like, yeah, sure, the console itself wasn't in production anymore, but in Japan, games for it were really selling well. Like, it still was getting games made for it. So I'm looking at it like, okay, that's 1998 to 2007. That's 9 years. That's pretty decent. That's pretty good. And that is just with the official stuff for the console. Now, I'm not even talking about like unofficial games, which I have a list of games right here that are actually still being made for the console. Like, so, if you wanted to go from the time the console started to unofficial to up to this year unofficially, the Dreamcast is still doing pretty well for a console that doesn't have any more official games released for it as of right this moment. And I'll go through my list really quickly. There was Feet of Fury, which came out in 2003. It's sort of like a Dance Dance Revolution type game. I'm not really into those, but I know there are plenty of people that are. Then there was Inhabitants, which was sort of like a puzzler game that came out in 2005. There weren't any unofficial games released for the Dreamcast in 2004. At least not what I saw. I mean, like, released commercially that were unofficial games. Not like, homebrew and stuff like that. Just wanted to clarify that. Then there's Makupai. I think that's how it's pronounced. If I said it wrong, I said it wrong. Which was like a mahjong type of game. Then there was Cool Herders. From what I saw of that, I guess you could consider it like an action puzzler type game. It kind of had elements of Choo Choo Mouse and, like, I'd say Bomberman. That's another subject. Then there was Frog Feast, which I honestly thought that was a typo, and I thought it was supposed to be Frog Fest, but it actually is Frog Feast, where you're playing with a couple frogs and eating a bunch of flies. But that game was also released on Jaguar and a couple other things, so I guess they just ported it to a bunch of systems, really. And then there is Last Hope, which was put out in 2007, which was a side space shooter, which also had a director's cut version released for the Dreamcast in 2009 called Last Hope Pink Bullets. Then there's Ducks, which is also a side shooter, which came out in 2008, which is actually getting a remake that's supposed to be coming out this year, and those who knew about the Kickstarter and helped fund the Kickstarter, I think we're getting copies of the Dreamcast version of the game, which would be in very limited production. Which unfortunately for me means I can't just go buy it unless I go on eBay, and then I'm going to be paying exorbitant prices for it. But we'll see if I get it on Dreamcast. It's also supposed to be on Xbox Live and I think PSN. I'll have to look it back up. I don't know for sure. Then there's Wind and Water Puzzle Battles. Obviously a puzzle game. It looks like it has like a sort of unique story to it, but I haven't really looked much into it. I just sort of like looked at what the game was and kind of got a feel for what it was how it's supposed to play when I looked at videos. Because like I said, I'm thinking about just going back and like expanding my catalog, and what would be a better way than to go ahead and get some of the independent titles that were put out. And there's also Irides, Master of Blocks. That one didn't look too interesting to me. That's just my personal perspective, because it kind of is like it had bland colors and things like that. But then again, I didn't really look at like a whole video of it. I just kind of like, okay, so this is what that is, and then I'll move on. Then there's Rush Valley Racing, which, if I remember, that was made by Senile Team, the guys that did Beats of Rage. That was put out in 2009. Oh, Ducks, Wind and Water were 2008. Master of Blocks was 2009. I completely spaced on that. I didn't even say those years. Rush Valley Racing was put out in Dreamcast in 2009 by Senile Team, and I think they also made a WiiWare version of the game, which I think was the following year. I don't know for sure, but you can always look it up. I just don't know right now off the top of my head, because I glanced at information about it. Then it was Fast Striker, which is like an over-the-top arcade style shooter, which came out in 2010 for the Dreamcast. I'm like, why am I not finding out this stuff sooner? And then I was like, well, I didn't look it up, so that's my fault for not figuring it out. But it's actually pretty cool that the console's still getting games. And be that it is not an HD console, these games when I was looking at them, they still look pretty damn good for it to not be HD. I think honestly, it was VGA, which was 1080p, not 1080p, 480p, which is enhanced definition. Pretty much the same thing that we did. So, but 480p was actually native resolution for the Dreamcast, and it downscaled to 480i when if people didn't have like VGA or whatever. I don't know if that's how it was for the Wii. I don't think that's what it was. But yeah. Then there's Gunlord, which that game actually looked pretty interesting to me too. But that was also made for the Neo Geo MVS, if I remember correctly, because the team that's behind it is the NG Dev team, Neo Geo Dev team. So I'm guessing it's just rather simple for them to port their games from the Neo Geo to the Dreamcast. Honestly, that game looked pretty damn cool. It's sort of like a Contra Metal Slug style game, which was why I was interested in it. I'm probably gonna get a copy of it because I know they sell it. I know they still sell it. I'm just like, I might get a copy of that. Then there's Age of Beast, which has been in production for a while by Senile Team, which I don't know if I can even say that's going to come out this year, but it looked like a fantastic game, and I think it uses the Beats of Rage engine, but like I said, it would just depend on what they did with it and if they finished it. I know that as far as what I've read, they're still working on it, and it was a brawler, but I hope they get that fucker finished because I want to get it. And Ghostblade, another arcade style over top shooter, space shooter type game. I was looking at that and like, I've got to pick up some of these games. Like, there are quite a few of them over here. Age of Beast and Ghostblade were supposed to be out this year. I think Ghostblade already came out. I'm not certain. I think it is out though. If I remember correctly, it was supposed to come out earlier this year. There's also Leona's Tricky Adventures. I mean, that's kind of, when I looked at it from what I got, it's sort of like a puzzle game with like a questing type feel to it. At least from what I saw. And then there's also Neo XYX, which I think is also made by NG Dev Team, which is another over-the-top shooter. It's pretty self-explanatory. The game looks fantastic, but I'm just saying that's what type of game it is. You'll probably want to look these games up, and at least for the ones that are supposed to be out this year, I'm going to link videos in the description so that people can see them. That's just what I'm going to do. Like, I can't do it for all of them, even though I looked at video for all these games, but at least the 2013 games for Dreamcast I will link below. Pure Solar, which was actually put out on the original Sega, put out on the Sega Genesis first, which it was a game that truly pushed that system to its limits. It was a huge game. It used a 64 megabit cartridge, and on top of that, if you had there was the special enhanced CD that goes to it, that if you have a Sega CD drive and it's connected to your console, you can put the disc in there and you can get enhanced music for the game. They did a Kickstarter last year and are remaking the game so that they can put it out on other consoles and put it on Xbox Live. They're going to put it on the Wii U, the Dreamcast. Obviously, the Dreamcast isn't going to get the HD version of the game, but it will be an enhanced version of the game. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure they also said it's going to end up on Android and Ouya and things like that. Either way, it's going to be an awesome ass fucking game. I know I'm going to get that fucker because I've wanted to get Pure Soul since I've heard about it, but it's expensive as fuck to get that. It is costly. So I'm hoping that once they do their printouts for everything, I can grab myself a Genesis copy and get the enhanced CD along with being able to get a Dreamcast copy, and then I'll probably end up with an Android copy because that way I have something to play when I'm on the go and it'll be interesting to me. Then there is, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this correctly, I might be wrong, Stormwind. I think it might actually supposed to be Stormwind, but there's a U in the middle of it. So, but that I know came out earlier this year, and it is a side-scrolling shooter. And like I said, it's another one of those games that's on the Dreamcast that looks really good, even though it's not an HD game. And that's just, and it makes me say, why the fuck do people always shoot down a console because it doesn't have the most amazing games in the world on it that they want right off the bat? And then we come to find out later on down the line that there are still people developing games for these consoles. The independent market for the Dreamcast is actually doing, at least from what I've seen, pretty well. I mean, just going by this list, though, and that's from 2013, 2003 to now, so that's 10 years. There's yeah, it's 20 games. That's not bad for a console that is actually off the market and dead. That's actually not a bad deal. So I'm just going to say I am in full support of people, doing their games after the market for the console itself is over with. I'm really wondering what people are going to start doing with like the Wii. That's what I'm curious to see what's going to happen with the Wii and the 360 and the PS3 after their market is over with. I mean, because think about it, it's like there's a lot they can do there. And independent developers who are making games for consoles that are pretty much, dead can actually push the consoles to their limits. They can push the systems to past their limitations in ways that game makers can't really do for consoles that are in the market. At least that's how it seems. I mean, like I said, the Pure Solar example in Genesis and the disk drive. But that's all. I'm pretty much done. That's all I really wanted to do was just name off Dreamcast games. If you have any reason to get a Dreamcast, right now is these games are a reason to get it. Go ahead and look up the all of the Japanese import games that never, like, the ones that came out after 2002 that never made it to anywhere else outside of Japan. But yeah, I'm done. Thank you for listening in. I'm keeping an eye out for more of my stuff, and I hope you enjoy this. So until the next time, enjoy your games.